Hi guys, my name is Dawn Love and I'll be focusing on Class 9 Social Enterprises and Doing Businesses Differently. Starting off with the first reading by Korsenbrook, Timmis, and Smith, they bring forth an idea that there are three types of social enterprises: successful hybrids, antagonistic organizers, and autonomous entrepreneurs. Successful hybrids have a good balance between the social and the private. This form of entrepreneurs complement the government as well as trying to do things outside the guideline that the government has provided. Social enterprises provide solutions to specific social problems, while the government supports these organizations through funding. In this form, there is a harmony between both groups, which allows them to work effectively hand in hand with each other. The second type of social entrepreneur are antagonistic organizers. This group prefers to work outside the framework and guidelines provided to them. Though they are still financially dependent on the government, their relationship to the government is limited only to this: financial dependency. Groups tend to merge antagonistic organizers into either a successful hybrid or to the autonomous entrepreneurs. Autonomous entrepreneurs are a mixture of both hybrid and antagonistic organizers because they too try to go against the government status quo, but they also try to work within the invited or created space in order to achieve their objective. It focuses on balancing and combining a realistic commercial approach with an idealistic social one. By being able to successfully sell a good or service in the market, they are able to gain their independence from the government since they are no longer dependent or no longer as dependent on the financial support that the government provides. For example, there's an organization called Green Change, Jane and Finch, which I believe falls under a successful hybrid. So Jane and Finch Community and Family Center focuses on training, support, and advocacy for residents in order to find employment, while also meeting expectations by the government. In this reading, social enterprises are being defined as a combination of a primarily societal movement with a business-like entrepreneurial approach. These businesses do things differently by not just bringing or providing goods and services to the economy, but also incorporating a social aspect where they can encourage changes in the society. Government funding is a huge aspect when it comes to social enterprises because most rely heavily on the government for financial assistance, which leads me to the second reading by Peter Elson and Peter Hall. Here, they conducted a study to prove that there are differences in the nature of social enterprises and how they have evolved, whether it is historically, culturally, or socioeconomically. Elson and Hall define social enterprises as, per the reading, quoting, emerging as both an identifiable and viable organizational form capable of providing goods and services in the marketplace and motivated by a clear social, cultural, and environmental or employment mission, end quote. They, however, put a great emphasis on the structural functional definition, especially during their research. So a social enterprise must apply the structural nonprofit form and functional benefits that are social, environmental, and cultural. They do acknowledge that political context can influence the nature and scope of the social enterprise, but it cannot influence their nonprofit form or their goal of selling goods and services. And social enterprises must be engaged in market activities that achieve a social, environmental, and cultural benefit. Their study touches the concept of breaking even and the success rates of social enterprises. Most of those that break even tend to have government support or individual foundations and grants. This does not mean that those without government assistance aren't doing well. It's just that it so happens that those who do have government backing find it easier to break even. Elson and Hall also addresses two major factors that affect social enterprises. Number one would be the parent organization, because they tend to follow their form of governance and what they do. Number two would be the impact that they have on the environment and their surrounding, which then leads me to the third reading by Martin and Osberg. Here they touch on the three components that social entrepreneurs generally have. Social entrepreneurs are able to identify what causes exclusion, marginalization, or suffering of humanity by using these to achieve any transformative benefits. And they also are able to identify an opportunity to develop a social value proposition. And finally, they're able to release trapped potential of targeting groups and even society at large. Social entrepreneurs can find ways to channel these forms of suffering into something that would benefit not only the group, but also those being affected by this specific exclusion or the exclusion that they are targeting. This is the main difference between entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. This idea of value proposition. They don't sell a product or service. They find a way to transform or create ripples in society that they can't ignore, or that society itself cannot ignore. These three readings have one key concept or a common denominator when associating or defining a social enterprise. They all somehow relate to the community. They all somehow relate back to the community. Social enterprises are organizations and associations that are rooted and grounded in building community or benefiting the society as a whole. In the first reading, they define social entrepreneurs to focus primarily on a social motive, meaning anything they come up with has to make society better one way or another. The second reading repeatedly emphasizes that any organization needs to be a social, environmental, and cultural benefit in order to be considered a social enterprise. And the third reading then states that what makes an entrepreneur a social entrepreneur is the value they add to society, where their main focus is the transformational benefit of what they're doing and what that ultimately means for the society. Thank you so much for listening.